What's up, guys? So, real quick, this is the build that I'm running now with my Necro, and I've been trying to tweak it ever so slightly. And the idea here is you want to go really high on Immortal Spirit for the regen, and you want to set a regen gear, and then you want skill crit and skill damage, and you want a lot of global attack, but you don't want to, you don't want to go over the top. You may have to tweak this as needed. This is what I'm using for relics. And then, well, come to think of it, actually, there's one little change I need to make in my relics. Move this over to that. Anyway, the main thing here is with the pals in particular, I'm using this set, and then I'm using this set for the actual skills. And to be honest with you, you probably don't necessarily need to run like combo, for example. You could just as easily go down either one of these. In fact, I like using Star Array in this case and not even using either one of those skills yet, because in order to really make it viable to do like PAL combo and a tank build, for example, you need like a stupid amount of regen, and or you've got to find a way to acquire enough damage, and that's just really hard to do. But what I do is I'm basically working on a set of regen gear here, and once I get the regen set finally done, then what'll happen is you aim for as high enough regen that you can get, up to like about 5 or 6%. That's about where you want to be. I'm obviously really far behind, but what you do then is you take up all of that and you throw it into skill crit, and then give yourself a lot of skill crit damage and skill damage that you can get. Now, like right now I'm working on my attack bonus and my HP bonus. So like right now I'm focusing on attack bonus, and I'm just doing that simply by adjusting my prayer statue. So like right now I've got, global attack. If I had it fully tweaked out, I'd go all global attack, but I mean, you can just as easily swap to like a full set of HP, for example. And all that does is basically make it so that rather than you having a really high attack bonus, it brings your HP up, which makes you tankier. And then by consequence of doing it that way, you will always have a really high PAL damage rate. So really, ultimately, you're trying to kind of increase the amount of core damage that you're doing and trying to make yourself live as long as possible while being as big as you can be. Now, I will say that downside to this is that, yeah, you can do like a set of crit gear or a set of combo gear, for example. So like, instead of, say, going regen gear, you could go conceivably down this route, and what that'll do for you is give you a stupid amount of crit rate and combo, and then you can turn around and use that. And again, you'll have a really decent skill crit on top of that, but you'll also have all these extra bonuses. And again, this is just something I've been playing with, because if you have a crit set, then you can just, you could take Star Array out, for example, and say throw in Ancestral Will and give yourself a stupid amount of crit damage on your pals. And you'd think surely this would work really well, right? And I'll show you. Like if I go into PvP just with a, maybe not so much on the tankier side of things, right? And I just hop in and let's say we go against a mage with a pal crit set. It's gonna be wildly different. I haven't been working on pal combo for that matter, or pal crit, because I don't think you really want to focus on those in the gear. I really think it would work better if you had like either a regen set or even like what I've got here, where it's really what was a combo set and a crit set that I had going for my build. But it works fine in this instance, because really all I'm doing is basically manifesting as much damage as I can into skill crit to get skill damage, and then I'm doing as much as I can to get all of those crits to fire off. Now, I'm happy to using the Peppy artifact just because it basically scales off of the amount of damage that you have. But another really good pick here is, so let's say you happen to have this artifact, and again, you may not have any of the artifacts, and I can show you what it's like without it, but another good one would be the Carnage. It's like Because part of the reason why we like the Carnage here is because every crit you get, you're going to get extra damage. So again, I can kind of show you how that plays out. So, I don't know, I'll go up against Nightmare, for example. Alright, and going with a Flaming Carnage instead of the alternative is, again, it still makes you fairly tanky. Partly because of the amount of regen that you have. That's what makes this work as well as it does. But then you're really well rounded. And that's the thing about the Necro class that I really like, is it's not so much like you can play around with it and dive into one stat or the other, or you can take advantage of all of them at the same time. And that's what makes this class so versatile, I think. And part of the reason why I enjoy using it. I mean, now if, let's say, I don't know, right now we've only been dealing with people that are around 50, 55k. Let me see if I can find somebody that's like a little bit higher. Okay, like Coleslaw, he's 62k, so he's probably high enough that he's probably going to squash me, but I don't know. I haven't really tested it any higher than like 3 to 4k above. But at least I'm not like dead right away either. And that's saying a lot, because normally I am dead like right away. So let's try like Trap Guide here at 59k, and he's a plume. So again, kind of the same premise here. Yeah, it shreds on Plume. Like Plume will still shred you. I would say the only exception to this might be the Warrior class. And let's see if I've got a Warrior around here that I can show you. But again, the point. Oh, so like here we go. Here's a 54k Warrior. And I don't even know if it's a good Warrior at that, but it's a Warrior class, so it can kind of give you an idea of what you're dealing with. So like even here you can see it doesn't really work as well. Like it's good for profits and stuff like that, but it kind of falls short of any, like when you go in middle of the lane like that, it just doesn't work as well. So what I tend to do is I've been kind of, so like even now, like given that I've got regen at 0.54% there, right? Part of the reason all of these work as well as they do is the talents are not actually in the Tame Beast tree like you would expect. It's actually in the Sork tree and going down Endless Outburst, and you're wanting active skill energy regen, and you want the amount of skill regen that you get. You get 0.8% on skills, which in my opinion, compared to the measly 0.4% for every 8 attacks on the actual pals themselves, is actually really low for what you can gain. I mean, I'd even argue doing 5 combos is still better, but I think the skills are probably like the best place to pick up that extra HP that you're missing in order to tank. So you don't even have to necessarily work on regen gear so much if you don't want to, and you can fire off the number of skills you have. And so like, for example, instead of like going down, let's say you don't have Cloud Drifter, you could just as easily wear like a Magic Carpet, for example. And again, as far as the Pepe style thruster is concerned, this is just a 5% attack bonus. It's like maybe the only reason why I even use it to begin with. But like if we go against somebody, say like Chica, who's a magic build, that's just a little bit higher, not by a lot, but a little bit, enough that it'll probably make a difference. Just by throwing Magic Carpet on instead of skill crit. The idea here is that you're wanting to fire off as many skills as you possibly can, as that is what is primarily healing you. And so you kind of tank really well, and that's why I use 100 slashes, and I also use Moonfalls, because it reciprocates really, really well. But that said, on the same token, if I were to, play this build a little differently and show you like the regen version of it, then all you do, instead of getting like a ton of combo and such and such, like where you're wanting combo and crit and you're going off of every crit, so then you're not going to worry about the Flaming Carnage, you're going to go back to tier attack or something that ultimately you can use to give yourself more stats. You're just now focusing more heavily on the amount of skills that you fire off. And you'll notice I never did bother to change, like, you can, during that build, you can go a little bit more combo or crit if you want to focus primarily on that. And on the pals, I don't really feel like adjusting these too much. And I like using Fox here, partly because if, let's say, you want to throw in, like, a stun in here, I've been using Nature Renewal, but, like, you can throw in, like, a stun, for example, or even Smoke Bomb. and you can play around with it a little bit. But it's kind of nice because if you throw in like a stun there instead of doing the alternative, which is a heal, I can show you kind of how that plays out too. So just like with that little tweak, and again, remember, we're now wearing regen gear, and that's the only problem with the regen gear right now, is I just needed to get it up to where it's really viable, because a really decent set of regen gear is actually really, really good. I just haven't gotten a regen set that's close enough. But we could try to Trap God again, and just kind of give you an idea of like what this would look like. Because the idea is again, we're wanting to proc as many skills as we can. Let me see if maybe, I don't know if cross server, maybe I've got enough in there. Oh yeah, I do. So we'll pop a random here and we'll just see how it plays out. But again, the idea is pretty much the same. Is you're wanting to tank as much as you can. And you can see it just doesn't freaking work as well, really. I mean, the idea is there. It's just the gear itself is so low that I can't really play it out. But what I would do is basically, you would want to try and increase your skill crit and your skill damage and your skill crit damage as much as you can, and then try to buff your HP up a certain such and such a way, and up your global attack as much as you can. Because really what you're ultimately aiming to do there is, you fire off as many skill crits as you can to get as many skill hits to get as much HP as you can back. And it's kind of a question of like whatever you think is going to hit faster. Like you can technically go down the pathway of like instead of say using skills to work on this, you can go down the Tame Beast route, get the combo rate up to 30%, and then fire off a bunch of combos, right? And use like, instead of maybe Fox, use like Cactus and get a stupid high combo rate on the actual pals themselves. And that kind of works, but I've never been able to get that to work consistently well enough to be able to like do enough DPS just like across the board if you're in PvE or in PvP. Like I just can never get it to soak well enough, and so like right now, this to me, this set is like working really fairly well because it complements it so well, and so you don't really have to worry about it as much. On the enchants, you again trying to get global skill damage in here, but you don't necessarily have to. Like you could just as easily, instead of doing that, go like a full global combo route, for example, or even go crit and combo. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the only really major difference is you're not adding any combo in your attacks. So in order to really make that work, you got to be focused in on the combo damage. So you change out your skill crit for combo, and you fire off as many combos as you can. And again, going back to like, whatever your ultimate aim is with this build, you might be wondering why I use Stone Rip Tome instead of Flamebook, and it's just because you want to make yourself a little tankier, and that little extra for the pals is, for resistance and everything, it's just going to make you a little bit punchier and a little bit harder to kill. But, so like that, I bring up my combo up to 36%. It still needs to be higher than that, though, so I would say the only other place that you can adjust the amount of combo you have, really, if anything, is probably going to be in the pals. And so, like, maybe instead of using Fiery Tail, we just take that out, throw in our combo banana. And I think that's really about all you'd need to change, really. Because that'll bring your combo up to 48 and your crit to 47. That's, like, the only thing you have to change. And then once you jump into, like, a challenge here, again, you're not focusing so much, like, on the actual skill damage. Now you're focusing more on the amount of combos you can fire off, and that's where you can kind of decide whether you want to do more skill crits to get yourself HP back, or if you're wanting to do something else. Like, that's ultimately up to you. But like, so like if I go back against a Trap God, for example, and this is again just playing around with it, a little different of an approach, but the idea is kind of the same. The only problem being is whenever you go up against a plume, you've almost got to be a counter build. And that's the next thing I'm going to try on my next set and see if I can make like a counter build version of this. Because all you would do instead is you would want to probably use the dog, and then you would want toothpaste. The problem is I don't have toothpaste. So I can't really easily find a way to make a counter build work. And I also don't have a set of counter gear. So I need counter gear in order to make that work. And just like my regen build, I just don't have the regen gear to do it. But either way, I think there's an angle there too. And it actually probably synergizes better as a counter build, just because you can actually... so again, I would focus on probably on HP still. But in a counter build, all I'd do differently is instead of going heavy over on... So like in this build, I was ultimately aiming for like crit rate and getting as much crit damage there. You'd actually probably want to go for the PAL combos, and then you would want to get your counters to fire off as your HP goes back. So if you go back into the talent tree real quick, here. Okay, so like what you would do instead is you'd actually go down the Fury path, and you would want to grab your Ascension and grab Healing, and then you would want to focus the rest of that probably in Counter Rejuvenation, and that's where you would get the other chunk. So like I can kind of show you, I'll go ahead and kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. And I don't know if it's like super overpowered or not, but we could try it. Because what I would want to know is how high is the HP on this. Yeah, it's comparable. So you can get 1% back. So yeah, it is comparable to doing it with, like, if I was doing it with skills. Because skills and this are very much the same way. Except now you're doing it every 5 counters, where this is every skill. Which is why I think skill regen is really good. Like, that's part of the reason why I think skill regen is hands down the best in that slot. Because of this, you can get away with basically some stupid crazy builds, because you're getting so much of that HP back. But on the same token, you know, it's like, I also like Endless Outbursts, because when you get to down to 20%, as long as you can keep yourself alive, that's going to give you a stupid amount of skills to fire off, which when you're getting all that HP back, that adds up. Plus, you can also adjust your active skill energy regen, which, as you already know, the more times you are able to proc off your actual ability, the more longer they are prone to PAL damage, basically. You know, so if your basic attack is really high, you can also synergize like different types of skills. Like if your basic attack's high, you can use like Celestial Surprises with the Flaming Carnage, and you can basically use all of that basic attack damage and global attack damage, that it'll all jump and scale in with your PAL damage. You know, so like if you want to increase the PAL damage, rather than actually multiplying the PAL damage stat itself, you just increase basic attack. The only downside of that, though, is that you'll run into players that have like full evasion or profit builds where they one-shot you, or like, you know, in the case of, you know, somebody that runs profit, you'll often find that they'll make themselves incredibly tanky. Like, that's the only reason why the basic attack approach doesn't work as well. Like, you don't want to go that far into it. But in any case, if you want to save some money, though, check out this part of the video, and I'll see you guys next time.